Hello and welcome to Qobuz Live, everyone. My name is David Solomon. I'm the Chief High-Res Music Evangelist at Qobuz, which is an awesome job because I get to do really cool stuff like this. Today, we're doing our show on Wednesday instead of Thursday. We'll still have our normal show tomorrow, but today we've got a very special show featuring a discussion about John Coltrane's 60th anniversary of Giant Steps. We just got Giant Steps in 2496, and it sounds incredible on Qobuz. As the first streaming service to deliver full studio-grade high-resolution audio, Qobuz is proud to be a part of this launch. If you want to hear the album in its highest quality, plus a lot more, and really even learn a lot about Coltrane, we've got tons and tons of information on them. Stop by and to Qobuz.com. Anyone can get a free 30-day subscription. So all of the music that we talk about today, you'll be able to hear in high resolution, which is really amazing the way this stuff sounds. Let's see, we've got some very special guests today. So without further delay, I'd like to bring on a couple of pretty cool guys. The first guy is a Grammy-winning Coltrane historian and New York University professor Ashley Kahn. We'd like to also welcome writer and musician Greg Tate. They'll both be the moderators, and they'll introduce you to this incredibly well-stacked panel. So Greg and Ashley, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being here.
David, thank you.
Much obliged, my friend. Much obliged.
Well, Greg, listen, I don't want to take up any more of this precious time because there's going to be a lot of this is going to be a really fun live stream for us. So I'm going to excuse myself and let these guys really get down to it, introduce the panelists, and you guys have a great time today. I can't wait to see what you all have to say.
Thank you again, David. It's a real honor to be here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, as it were, and being part of this very, very special event. We got 3 anniversaries that we're celebrating today. The first, of course, is the 94th birthday, what would have been the 94th birthday of John Coltrane himself. The icon, the legend, the man whose sound is still present with us today in such a big and important way. It's also the 60th, this year is the 60th anniversary of a really breakthrough album as far as his career and his sound and his compositional presence, and that is, of course, Giant Steps, which was released on January 26th of 1960. So we're a few months later, than that, but here's the original, what the original cover looked like. And we're also celebrating the release as of last Friday of the 60th anniversary edition, courtesy of, in physical formats, Rhino, the reissue arm of Warner Music. And for streaming and downloading, of course, you have Qobuz with, as David mentioned, 24-bit, 96 kilohertz quality, which is really the kind of defining high fidelity end of online audio. So, we have all these events kind of coming together, and we wanted to celebrate it in a way that, was appropriate to the music, appropriate to the giant's shadow, pun intended, that is cast by this music 60 years later, and required not just one moderator, but 2. So my esteemed colleague, Greg Tate, is here to help introduce this incredible all-star panel that we've collected together for you to help celebrate. Greg, do you want to introduce?
For sure. In alphabetical order, let me bring on the copacetic and exuberant Melissa Aldana, saxophonist and composer. Lakecia Benjamin, saxophonist and composer. Shabaka Hutchings, saxophonist and composer. And the iconic Archie Shepp.
Thank you, Greg.
also saxophonist and
Did we
composer.
meet
Thank you.
at Princeton?
We sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We did a talk with for Rudras.
Yeah.
Rudras, on top of there. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good to see you again, sir.
Good seeing you again.
Yes, indeed.
So why don't we kick it off, Greg, with an opening question or statement from you, and get everyone to kind of chime in, and let's hear their voices, and take it away.
Yeah. Well, Brother Shepp, I'd like to start with you because you knew Train, of course, and I'd like to know when he came into your life, musically and personally.
Well, I first became aware of John when I was in high school. I was trying to learn how to play notes above high F on the saxophone. And I got into a discussion with another musician, a drummer, and I asked him if he knew any saxophone players who played above high F on the sax, and he said there's a guy named John Coltrane, lives in North Philly. I'm from Philadelphia. Was raised in Philadelphia. I'm from Florida originally, and so at that point, John became a myth and a legend for me that a man I had to meet. And the first time I heard him was out in West Philadelphia, at a club, I think it was called the Red Rooster. And it was his group. And I remember the song they played was "What is this thing called love?" And I was rather disappointed because John didn't play much. He played a chorus, which was really quite dramatic. He had a way of really opening a solo with a great deal of passion and force. But he only played a few bars, and then he seemed to be very disappointed with himself, and he didn't play anymore. The next time I met him, I was in college. He had just joined. He had played with Miles, but at this point, he no longer worked with Miles. He was with Monk at the 5 spot, and I remember he played all. He never stopped playing. On the intermissions, he would go into the. There was a restaurant at the 5 spot, and he would go into the kitchen. He'd walk off the bandstand with Monk, and he'd keep on playing, and he'd go into the kitchen, and he played the whole intermission. He would be playing scales, and you could hear him. So at the end of the night, I took advantage of introducing myself to him. I said, Mr. Coltrane, I'm from Philadelphia, and I wonder if you could help me with my saxophone. And he wrote his address out in a very neat hand and told me to come by the following day. Well, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning at that time, and Train had a habit of, he practiced himself to sleep. So I imagine when he got home, he lived uptown on Columbus Avenue, and he probably played till about 6 in the morning, till he just felt, as one musician told me, he came and he visited John very late in the evening after a set with Monk, and he found him asleep with his horn on his stomach. That was about 6 or 7 in the morning. Well, I came to see John the following day about 10 o'clock.
Mm.
And I'm sure he hadn't really slept at all, not much. And he didn't get up till about 1, though I waited. He was then married to Alice Naima, and she told me to wait in the living room for him. And when he came out, he got up at about 1. His horn was on the sofa, and he went right to his horn,
Mhm.
and he started playing something like giant steps. About 10, 15 minutes of uninterrupted saxophone. I had never heard the saxophone played so adroitly and so with such imagination. And when he finished, uh, he asked me to play some for him. And at that time, I was playing alto sax. And partly because I'd heard that he and Jimmy Heath had started on alto. And I had traded my tenor. I had a brand new tenor sax. I traded it in for an alto, an old alto, because I thought that there was something charismatic about playing the alto before the tenor. I had started on clarinet, but at this point I had an alto, and so I played. And when I finished, he advised me to keep my fingers closer to the keys, and that way I would be able to execute notes faster. But what was interesting is that his solo was very much like the one that you hear on Giant Steps. So I think he'd been practicing that idiom, those lines, for quite a while. He was very disciplined, and I have a feeling that everything he played, he could play again. He could repeat it exactly in the same manner because he had practiced those lines over and over again. So, well, that's how I met John, and
Yeah.
I didn't see much of him. We saw each other 2 or 3 times after informally, where we talked, and mostly he talked. He didn't really show me much on the horn, but he would tell me things that I would go home and practice. And he had a great deal of admiration for Monk and Miles. We spoke
Mm.
one day. We talked all day about Monk and Miles and Art Tatum and some of his favorite uh, instrumentalists. Uh, but that was basically my relationship with him. Now he had a more uh, tactile relationship with people like Wayne and Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
They actually practiced together, and they had a more kinetic relationship. But John was like a big brother to me, an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
I was an only child for 14 years. So when I met Train, he was the older brother that I wished I had had.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very, very good to me, John. He, um, he arranged my first recording date with Impulse Records was because of him.
Mm-hmm.
And some my first recording on some of his iconic albums, Love Supreme and Ascension. and another piece album called Hard Driving Jazz. It's not so well known, but
That was with Cecil, right?
yeah, I think with CT and Gratian Munker and several of the younger players at that time.
Right.
He arranged a session, and that might not have been the Hard Driving Jazz was John and Cecil,
Right.
and Kenny Dorham, I believe, might have been on that.
Fantastic.
Well, look, good. Okay, Lakecia Benjamin,
Yes, sir.
welcome to the fray. You just released a a fantastic album in tribute to the Coltrane, Pursuance, and the album of the hour is Giant Steps. You do a number of pieces from that album on your record, and I imagine that record has been in gestation for a very long time. The first time I saw you play was actually with Rashid Ali at the Charlie Parker Festival, which was that a decade ago or less?
It was 2010.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how important, when did Coltrane come into your life as an impactful figure? And when you were with Rashid, how important was he to your coming to an understanding of Coltrane's music, or a deeper understanding, I guess?
When it comes to Rashid, I mean, we all know Rashid was such an amazing, powerful musician, so he definitely set me on a path that I didn't even realize I wanted to be on. My first interactions, honestly, even as a saxophone player with John Coltrane's music, came from Alice Coltrane. I actually heard her music first. I heard her album and her song Turiya and Ramakrishna. And it really just kind of changed things for me. And, back in those days, you look at the little booklets, the liner notes. And I saw in the liner notes, she had said something as, supreme love for John Coltrane. So I went to Google. I was like, let me check it out. Who's John Coltrane? And the naive teenager I was like, oh, my God. I have to get on this quickly. So on that album, Alice Coltrane, Rashid is playing drums. So it was later on that I was at a jam session in New York. And I was kind of taking my time to, avoid the bartender. He wanted me to buy a drink. I just wanted to take a solo. So we kind of do this little game where, I pretend I'm a solo, then I sneak away. And he's like, you got to pay $20, little girl. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I actually sat in the bar next to Rashid, and I didn't know it was Rashid. I was sitting next to him because he had a full plate of food. He had a couple of drinks. I said, all right, this is the perfect guy. I sat next to him and was talking to him, and we were talking about just, the game on TV, music, life, nothing important. And he says, I'm going to leave. And he gets ready to leave. I said, all right, well, I'm going to go take a solo. And then he looks at me and goes, oh, you play an instrument? I said, yeah, I'm playing the saxophone. He said, all right, go up there and take a solo. I said, I can't just skip the line. He said, you're going to skip it today. I got places to be. So, I went up there. I saw somebody was soloing. I kind of tapped them on the shoulder. I said, I'm so sorry, brother. And I just started playing over the song. Took my solo. Everybody in the jam session looking at me like I'm so tired of this girl. I took a long one too. It wasn't no 2-3 choruses. It was a good 7-8. I was like, I'm gonna make it count. Maybe this guy has money for some dinner. And then he actually slipped his card in my pocket. He said, hey, give me a call tomorrow. And I still didn't know it was Rashid Ali. So I called him. I ended up going to his house to do a jam session. And that's when I found out it's Rashid Ali. So we're sitting there and he starts playing the drums. And I said, oh, man, you sound so familiar. And he kind of laughed at it. But Rashid's concept was actually kind of crazy. He called his rehearsal studio the gym. And maybe Mr. Shepp can testify to this. He would actually take a towel and put it over the clock. So for my audition, I guess, he took a towel, put it over the clock, and he said, I want you to play as fast as you can. Anything you can play, as fast as you can play it. And I was like, okay, fast is not my forte. So I was like, I'm going to just, bust out a Cherokee. So I start playing, he starts playing with me. Some time starts passing, I give him a drum solo. I take the head out. And as I'm trying to take the head out, he keeps playing. And I was like, maybe this guy didn't understand. I'm trying to take the head out. So I played the head again, and he still didn't stop. So I was like, let me take another solo. And my solo, he's doing such slick things with his ride cymbal that I can't get out of the solo. So every time I try to get to the one, it's almost like he does some kind of fill where now we're like on the, the two of like 3 bars later into the chorus. I got to keep playing. So we kept going back and forth like this until I got so exhausted of ideas and everything. And I just keep playing. And finally, my lip actually started bleeding. Mm-hmm. So I kept playing. And finally, I actually just took the sax off my neck and put it on the floor. And it's almost like he felt I did that and he just stopped playing. Went to the clock and took the towel down. And he said, "Oh man, 40 minutes? You want to be in my band?" and I said, "What?" I couldn't believe it. And I kept asking him, why in the world would you do that? And he said, "I wanted to exhaust the things that you normally go to, the ideas that you normally play from and the conceptions you have about music until you were left with nothing but your soul. And then I could find out who you really were."
Wow.
So that was my first interaction with him. And that's typically how his rehearsals went. Each horn player, he had us come down there and play with him individually at least 3-4 times a week to the gym. And, the gig, we played 3 songs a gig. And it would be 3 20-minute songs. I remember I tried to take 3 choruses on a song. He started yelling at me, "Play!" I was like, "Oh, God." I was like, I'm done. But, that was him. He was always trying to get the most out of you. So I thought of that in the spirit of this album that I have in terms of just
stamina.
Yes, not just stamina, but I wanted to, at the same time, challenge myself. I wanted to, when I think of John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane, I think of the higher standard of excellence when it comes to music, when it comes to life, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to the type of human being you want to be in the planet. So I felt that there was no higher honor than to try to not emulate what they did, but almost like present them a gift. If they were watching the studio session and sitting there, if I could say, "Here, this is how much the world loves you." So you can never achieve what they've achieved, but to just say thank you for all you've done for the planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Amazing story. Can you guys hear me? Did you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Because I think Shabaka wasn't hearing me, but Shabaka's with us all the way from London. Greg, if you want to ask him to step in, I know that he has some just in case that he can't hear me.
Interject?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Rashid actually was playing with me before he was with John.
Oh, wow.
And we used to practice from 12 in the afternoon to 12 at night.
Oh, my God. So you're the originator of this philosophy.
Cover that clock.
Yeah, Archie Shepp is the original clock.
So I know what you mean by his tendency to play a long time, and because we used to do that every day. And in fact, we were practicing for a gig in California, and about Christmas time, the gig was in April, but at Christmas we were still just doing our thing, and I got a job working at Abraham and Strauss, I think it was, during the holiday season. And Rashid and I, we practiced every day. But during this time, I got a call from him. He said, "I'm not going to be able to make it tomorrow because John Coltrane just called me and asked me if I would be in the band." Mm-hmm. And so we never got to go out to California together. But I took Viva Harris instead. But that was our routine.
Yes.
From 12 to 12. Yeah.
Beautiful.
God. Yeah. And he did. He had a way of playing. Time was circular with him rather than linear. And so when he would start playing, I would get inside his rhythm rather than to be playing for each of us to be playing in our separate groove. And I think that's what Train liked about him. He had a way of describing his concept of time. I can't remember what he called it, but it was not linear. It was more
multi-directional.
Multi-directional, multiphonic, or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shabaka,
Hi.
how you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. So tell us about your first encounters with John Coltrane's music, and what significance it had for you at the onset of your development.
My first encounter with it was when I was living in Barbados, so when I was about 15. And prior to that, I wasn't that interested in jazz. I was listening to a lot of calypso, reggae, hip hop from America. And I associated jazz music with upper class people, doing kind of rich things. Just the kind of view that I had in the Caribbean at that time. That all changed around about the time I was 15, when a couple of things happened. One, a friend of my mum's gave me a tape with a load of different jazz artists on them, which I just never heard before. I think that the idea of jazz I had came from just a distorted reality of not actually listening to the music, but just getting little snapshots of what certain elements signified. That album, that kind of compilation that I got had a load of different things. It had Miles Davis, Funny Valentine concert. It had Greg Osby, Man Talk for Moderns, Volume X. It had Paquito de Rivera's Caribbean Jazz Project. And not any John Coltrane, but it was something that brought me to wanting to understand about jazz. Once my mum knew that I, was interested in this music, she said, there's two albums you've got to get. One is Kind of Blue and one is A Love Supreme. So I was like, okay, I'll listen to it. Before that, I was like, I don't want to hear the music. It's not for me. I just want to hear my stuff. When I heard A Love Supreme for the first time, I think I was just confused. I didn't understand it. So I listened to it again and I still didn't understand it. And then I kind of came back the next day and it's like, I felt it. There was something that I could feel that was deep about it. And actually that's the lasting impression of John Coltrane's music on me, the depth. So for me, when I say depth, it means that it's got a surface level. It's got that surface level that I understood briefly when I was about 16. But then it's just got a lot of layers. So as I progressed in understanding more about music, I understood more about the different levels that he was trying to access. So for instance, when I was studying at college and learning about the harmonic intricacies of the music, what I was listening for was that harmonic matrix. As I start to understand more about actually what he's trying to express on a spiritual or on an intensity or energy level, then it starts to open up that whole area of his music, how it can affect you on a spiritual or on just an emotional level. So yeah, that's been just I'm growing with his music. I feel like when I'm 60 or when I'm 80, I'm going to be getting a completely different relationship with his music than I'm getting even now. And that's when I know that music affects me the most, when I can listen to it at every stage of my artistic development and I keep getting new things from it.
Yeah. Well, when did you start playing saxophone? Was that your first instrument?
The first instrument was the clarinet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the sax came about when I moved to England, so around about when I was 16.
Yeah. So again, we're kind of focusing on this anniversary of Giant Steps and its impact. In particular, that composition. I mean, at one point in time, it was considered almost like a proof of legitimacy for horn players, a kind of Mount Everest that they had to climb. And that was for a certain generation. Was it the same for you, though? Did you feel like this was a mountain you had to conquer?
Yeah, it definitely was, and it gave me many nights of neurosis trying to just play this thing as well as other people around me were playing it. And actually, that tune and the attitude around the tune was one of the things that actually inspired me to just go on my path in terms of trying to see how I can integrate elements of my own culture in my music, because I realized everyone's trying to get me to practice this tune so much that all I'm doing is trying to like chase after the ghost of John Coltrane, which is important to do. But at some point I realized that this matrix was so powerful that if I wasn't trying to actively include elements of my own cultural awareness into my music, that it would take over my whole kind of headspace.
Swallow you whole.
Yeah, and then it's like when I listen to the actual, it's like the idea of the tune Giant Steps is more, in some ways, more pertinent than the thing itself. When I listen to the actual record and Coltrane playing on it, it's got a load of soul. Its phrasing is, in line with the rhythm section. He's really taking us on a journey throughout the patterns that he's using in that tune. Whereas when I get the idea of what it's supposed to mean by people who try to emulate it, it's a whole different thing. It's to do with a lot of different priorities in terms of machoism and in terms of, like how fast can you play? How much do you know this matrix? So, yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Ashley, you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, the obvious thing to do is now, go from Barbados experience to Chile, in Santiago with Melissa, because, I know at a certain point, having your father teaching you and growing up in the center of the Chilean jazz community, you experience Coltrane and you experience Giant Steps too, correct?
Yeah. I actually started playing saxophone when I was 6 years old, and all what I was listening was Charlie Parker and Cannonball. And my dad bought me a new saxophone when I was around 12, and I heard for the first time Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, and I told my dad that I didn't want to play alto anymore. And so since then I've been playing tenor, and I was just deeply in love with the sound. And of course Coltrane is a huge influence, all those albums. But the most inspiring thing for me is to see his evolution through the years, how his sound changed, how the approach of the band changed through the years. And to me, that is something super, super deep and inspiring as a musician.
Can you explain more about that? Because you're very much about tone and texture. I mean, you're amazing with the sound and identity, the sonic identity that you've established for yourself. Obviously, hearing that coming from such giants as Sonny and Train is going to, hit your ear in a certain way. Can you talk about, that aspect and some more and how you explored it?
Yeah, I mean, I learned everything through transcriptions. To me, sound and ideas and time field are concepts, so I learned about it through deep transcriptions, meaning I focused on Coltrane for many years, until I was able to emulate the sound. And then the same with Sonny, and I had a period with Benny Golson as well, and some other saxophone players. So I learned everything about the sound I have from the giants like that. And then, so to me, learning from that and then bringing that concept into when I was practicing long tones or time field, that was what made it complete.
We asked each of our panelists to pick out a tune off of Giant Steps so that they can explain why they did that and what we hope we can hear from that. Melissa, why don't we start with yours? The track that you chose, why don't you tell us what you chose, and then we'll hear it and you can talk about it too.
I chose one of the most beautiful ballads ever, Naima, that he wrote for his wife. And, it's the kind of tune that I can hear it a million times, and every time I hear it, it just touches my heart. It's the sound, I feel the emotions through it, and it's just so much beauty into the way that he's playing it. So that is definitely one of my favorite ones.
Why don't we hear that now? Unfortunately, we because of limitations on playing licensed music, we have to cut off right at 44 seconds on these tracks. But what else would you like to say about that, Melissa? I mean, I know you and I have discussed the tail end of the tune too, the way that it has that ascending feel.
Yeah. Well, to me, this tune is just brings, well, besides being a super, I mean, simple but beautiful and complex melody at the same time, just the sound, the sound, the intention behind it, the little details is so rich, and it's just so much information and so much to learn from for people of my generation, that we didn't have the chance to hear him live. And I think that it's a whole masterclass just in one track on all those albums,
Fantastic. Thank you for choosing that.
Of course.
Could I interject again? I mentioned that John's first wife was Alice. Actually, his first wife was Anita. Anita's Muslim name was Naima.
And that's who was at home with when you went to visit in 1958? Right. That's an amazing story, Mr. Shepp, and I know that you were one of the first witnesses, along with, I guess, many other musicians who were jamming and playing with Train at the time in 1958, to hear the development of that giant steps, the chords and the ideas and the melodic lines that he was working out. You chose actually the title track from the album. Do you want to hear that now and talk about that?
Well, yeah, of course. Everything that John did was really...
Rhetorical question, excuse me.
I was immediately attracted and fell in love with all of his work, which to me is a constant evolution. You never knew what he was going to be doing next, playing two notes at once, playing solos that were just fantastic.
Why don't we hear the title track now, and we'll come back to it. I think famously there's the idea that, while John Coltrane had like 2 years to work this out, or even more, when he went into the studio famously with Tommy Flanagan to record this, he had actually played the chord structure for Tommy beforehand, but at a very slow pace. And so one of the kind of legendary aspects of the recording of the title track is that Tommy, you can hear the struggle, as he's trying to keep up at a much faster tempo that he had expected.
Yeah, he mentions that tune almost destroyed a beautiful friendship. Because he had no idea that John was going to play it our tempo. Because, as he said, when he demonstrated the song, it was in a relatively slow tempo. And when they got into the studio, he played it at a much brisker tempo, and Tommy wasn't ready for that.
But he handles it. I think a lot of people say he stumbles. He doesn't.
Yeah, I like his solo. In fact, I mean, it couldn't have been much more than that, because that was not an easy song to accomplish, to master.
Mm-hmm.
And Train had been playing it probably for years.
Well, he had the practice. Mr. Shepp, I'm going to ask you one more question about the fact that this album comes out in January of 1960. That's right at the beginning of a new decade. And, of course, following Coltrane, every new release that he came out with, there was another kind of step in the journey, another incredible advancement taking place. When Giant Steps came out, what was the impact on the jazz scene?
Well, it's rather what Shabaka had said. It became, and what Greg mentioned, it was a must accomplish. It became a challenge for every saxophone player. Felt he had to climb that mountain, as Greg stated earlier. And it was the same for me as it was for Pharaoh and Wayne and all the guys. It established another level of saxophone playing. And well, it was a challenge. I remember Vishnu Wood, who was teaching up here at Hampshire College, put on a concert, and he said, he told me, I want you to play. And he gave me a song of Randy Weston's and another song, and he said, and I want you to play Giant Steps. And he said it so casually, like it was, and I gulped, but so I availed myself of the transcription of Andrew White, and I practiced it for months. And the night we played it, I was really nervous, and because I felt I couldn't play it. But I started off with the first few lines of John, and then it sort of fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
All my practice, and somehow maybe the spirit of John Coltrane got into me, and I was able to play it. But it was a must-do for all the musicians of my generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lakecia, I'd like to throw it to you because you chose the track. By the way, I have to say that on this album, all the tracks are surprisingly compact. There's a lot of information in some very short, or relatively short for John Coltrane anyway, like 2.5 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute tracks. And one of the tunes, of course, is the tune that you chose, Lakecia. And could you tell us why you chose it and what about it you like?
I chose Spiral. On that album, pretty much all the songs are my favorite, kind of. But
I think we have Saida's song Flute. I don't know how I got that from you, but
it could work. I mean, I definitely said Spiral, but Saida's song Flute is my. It was actually like a throw up in the air. Which one is which one is more? So if you have Saida, I can talk about Saida. It's fine.
Sorry about that.
That's cool.
You can't go wrong with any choice anyway.
Yeah. Well, okay, if we're talking about Saida, my second favorite song, I think what stood out to me is, I'm from New York City, in the streets in New York City. So when I was growing up, I was digging myself deep into John Coltrane's music, deep into, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, all the classics. But, the street was pulsating Biggie Smalls. The street is pulsating Pete Rock instrumentals. The street is pulsating, So for me to hear a song come in with that boom, I was like, John Coltrane got that hip hop. That's the first thing I thought when I heard that. Because I'm, my teachers, they get me to stop rushing. Were asking me like, feel the 2 and 4, but stomp your foot on the 1 and 3 and hold yourself back. So when I first heard that come in, the mystery of it, and the way he's just so, it's the first time I kind of noticed, because in Giant Steps you just notice how clean he is and how immaculate it is, but this is the first time I noticed his phrasing, the spacing between it, and it's kind of like he's almost like an MC with it. So it's always been one of my favorite songs. So whether it's Spiral or Saida's flute song, to me, it's the phrasing in it, and kind of all songs that have that, like both Spiral and Saida have that kind of drone to it, over that little D pedal where you can choose to go with the G or the A flat, or you can kind of choose to play off that D mode and move with the changes. And as it goes from the minor to the major. To me, it's just a really fun song to play on, and it evokes a lot of emotion.
We should hear it now. Beautiful. Yeah. And you actually cover that on the tribute album, right?
Yeah, on the tribute we have Ron Carter on that and Keon Harold. But like I was saying, it's just amazing to hear. Even when they, that's the one song though that my friends from the neighborhood would listen to with me. They would try to rap over it and be like, "Oh, what's this you listening to? This jazz you're getting to is kind of cool," So just the way it flows, and then when he breaks into the swing, it's a really good song, even if you're an educator, to getting your younger students to understand the correlation between how Black music really moves through the different genres and the roots of each thing.
Yeah, so much tension and release, and then the explosion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Coltrane flow. Shabaka, would you like to step up with your choice and tell us what you chose and why you chose it?
Yeah, I chose Countdown, and for 2 reasons. One of them is I'm really interested in the psychology of the kind of imminent release of energy. So this is the point that connects Coltrane to, say, someone like Unison Bolt, in that what's that thing that happens when you have to explode, a massive, like ball of energy, like that moment just before like takeoff, like if you compare it to the 100-meter dash, when it's like 3, 2, what's that moment just before the one where everything has to be completely at an equilibrium, completely focused just before that energy is kind of bounced off. And for me, the start of Countdown, Coltrane is Unison Bolt, in terms of you can just feel that, the drums do the build up, and then he's off, and for me, it's like that moment. It's like it might be me making it up, but I can just feel that, like, that pull of energy just before the first note when it's like, wham, it's like someone pulls a catapult back and it releases into the flurry of notes that begin the song. But the second thing that drew me to this selection is the drums. And this is actually what centers me in this tune. This is actually the thing that I've maybe listened to most in the album. Even though it's kind of shameful that it's not John Coltrane, but the drums on this track, because I think it's Art Taylor on drums, he's doing the ride really quickly, and he's only sparsely interjecting with the bass drum and the snare. It's like he's not got all the other instrumentalists to interact with. So the hits that he's doing happen over a much longer space of time, and they happen in line with Coltrane's phrases. So for me, it's like if I'm just listening to when that bass drum and the snare is happening and how that's bouncing off Coltrane's phrases, I start to hear the song in a completely different way. And for me, that's like the most, when I started listening to it like that, it was like a profound realization, because I was listening from Coltrane downwards before. Then all of a sudden I started listening to it from the drums upwards. Actually, like the tension is him doing the ride cymbal. And then it's like, when is he deciding to make those hits? And it's not, it's like, it's really him and Coltrane in terms of the big phrase. They really kind of connected on some real deep psychological level, because when you kind of hook up that he's just dropping those bombs, just at those moments when Coltrane phrases are turning and when the intensity gets, to the point where it needs the release of the fill, it starts to be a completely different tune. And actually, I think that tune started me listening to a lot of other jazz tracks in a different way, listening to them from the perspective of the drums interacting with the melodic development. And yeah, I love it. I just, whenever I hear this tune, I just listen to, when's that hit gonna come? When's the snare gonna hit? When's the bass drum gonna, Yeah, I love it.
That's beautiful. Thank you for setting it up for us that way. Let's hear the track now.
Yeah, you only actually heard one snare on that thing after Coltrane came in, so it kind of defeats what I was saying. But when you hear the tune, in its entirety, you'll get it. But yeah, even then, it's like still that kind of catapult analogy. It really is strong for me in that just the kind of ride cymbal is providing that tension, and whenever I hear those hits, it's like it's released, and I love that. I get more out of the interplay with the drums in that track, because, like I said before, there's less forces that they're interacting with when they're just playing duo. So you can really hear how their phrasing is just melded together.
Thank you for taking us that deep into it. That was very insightful, and I love the idea that certain tracks and certain pieces of music teach you how to listen differently to other music, and not necessarily just jazz, but music in general.
Yeah, I think there's a Coltrane interview I read a long time ago where he was saying one of the things that he did was that he would listen to a tune and then try to listen to it from the perspective of every single member. So try to listen to the tune from the perspective of the bass, from the perspective of the drummer, from the keyboard. And it's something that I've tried to do ever since, really just, as a saxophone player, sometimes I get locked into the mind of the saxophone, and listen to things from the saxophone, downwards. Whereas when it's cyclical, as, Rashid was saying, Lakecia, you start listening from the perspective of all the different members, the constellations within the music. And yeah, once you start listening, what's the piano player? It's like I'll be getting into the mind of the piano player and trying to hear the saxophone from the perspective of the chords, or trying to hear the rhythm from the drums from the perspective of the bass. And it opens up a whole other area of the listening experience.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Lakecia, I wanted to ask you about your choice of collaborators, on your album, and in terms of rethinking how you're going to interpret and arrange these compositions, how did that affect the choices that you made in terms of Jasmine Horn and Michel Ndege cello and Gary Bartz and so forth?
I mean, yeah, it was a wide palette of people, but I think my first true intentions were before I had all the, I didn't intend to have like 45 guests, but it started off with just like, I'll have 10. And in a jazz album, that's a lot. But I wanted my guests in the beginning to be between 70 and 90, and I was looking for people that had actually played with Train. I think I asked Reggie Workman to reach out to you, Mr. Shepp, but maybe he went off into the wilderness. But I was looking for people that had new Train and stuff, because I felt that, as Shabaka was saying, when we deal with saxophone, it's so easy for saxophone players to get into saxophone mind, right? So it was important for me to find people that not only knew the music and knew the actual proper chord changes and stuff, but to find people that knew the personalities that could tell me this is what Love Supreme is about. John Coltrane didn't actually like coffee. He liked this. Like people that knew how they interacted with the world and what they possibly could be thinking, so that most important for me was to get the sentiment, the feeling of the music and the presence of the music before I could even start. After that, it kind of just literally spiraled way out of control, because the more I started thinking of people, and I wasn't really sure if these people were going to show up. So I was like, if I overbook, I'll have enough. So then too many people showed up, and then also some people did still at the same time. I originally, the day we started recording, was supposed to have 65 guests all confirmed, and 20 of them got lost in the woods. But the beauty of I intentionally, and people think it wasn't on purpose, but I didn't put any tenor saxophone on that album, because I feel like even when you listen to a tenor saxophone player, whether they're Coltrane or not, like he kind of haunts your spirit. The sound of Train, we've heard Giant Steps, Countdown, these songs so long that when somebody plays the melody, Train pops into your head and he kind of lives there. So luckily when I was playing, I never had the ghost of him chasing me around, playing. I could escape that feeling of it. Because and everyone around me, if they're alto players or just other guests playing other instruments, I could really think about the music. And then after that, it became, when I looked at my individual guests, I had a huge blackboard in my house, and I kind of wrote everybody's name, their age, where they're from, everything. And I could it made it easier for me to interpret the music, because almost like in a Charles Mingus kind of way, I thought, how about I make arrangements that highlight the things my guests are amazing at, versus making arrangements that highlight what John Coltrane or Alice Coltrane would have been good at. So if I know Jasmine Horn can really scat. Where can I put her in here that she would complement what's happening? And when I thought about it, that from each place in each way, I'd actually I was having a hard time with Train. Like my dreams were about Train. I was reading Alice Coltrane's books. I was consumed with them that I couldn't write any arrangements. And we had gotten to 2 weeks before the recording date, and I had no arrangements. So I kind of sat down. I was like, here we go. And looking at the blackboard and having everybody's concepts and ideas and kind of how I felt about the song and my personal life experiences, it allowed me to, especially with Alice's music, to free up the grooves a bit, because she doesn't have any drums on a lot of her records. So to me, it's how I'm feeling the beat. And with Train, I tried to be respectful, and I just knew that I was almost going on the battlefield. It's like even in the studio, it's like you're still fighting with him, because you're just like, the level is so high and the bar is so high. And then at the same time, I'm dealing with, the legacy of Train. My guess, the bar is high with them. Ron Carter's like, are you going to take the solo yet or not? He's waiting for me to stop sweating. So it was definitely an ultimate testament, because, they're pretty much like, are you ready to go? And at the same time, I was also the producer. I was producing the stuff. Reggie didn't come to the end. I was also calling people, scheduling it, talking to their managers, negotiating the prices. So it was very consuming.
You were the host.
Yeah, I was the host, and I was also playing.
And you were the label mogul, the A&R.
Yeah, there was a time actually where we were playing one of the songs, and I took my solo, and my phone is going off after the solo. So Greg Osby soloing, and it's like, Ron Carter, you gonna open the door or what? In the text message, but I can't move. But I don't want to, I can't leave him out there. He's gonna go home. So it was intense.
Wow. Well, Melissa and Shabaka, we focused mostly on Giant Steps and A Love Supreme today, but I'd like you both to kind of talk about the resonance that Coltrane's music in between those albums and then beyond A Love Supreme had on your appreciation of Coltrane. You know, I mean, what other music of his do you really embrace, or that really calls you in a certain kind of way?
Well, to me, the Ballads album. You know, I learned so much about how to play ballads. I transcribe how he interpreted ballads. You know, I like details. I'm fascinated by sound and intention and dynamics and everything. So Ballad is an album that I transcribe, and I transcribe how he just played the melodies, you know, and I learned so much just from that.
Yeah, for me, that album Expression, which I think is his last studio album, the first tune on that, Agondi, I can't pronounce it, but the first tune on it, it's like a 3-minute, one of the most beautiful kind of free leaning pieces that I think I've heard. And at the time that I started listening to that album, I was doing a lot of free improvisation in the kind of free improvised scene in London. And the paradigm that I had at that time was more along the kind of Albert Ayler, more listening to from Europe, Peter Brotzmann, a lot of Cecil Taylor, but I'd never heard anyone play that style of music, but quietly. And that was the thing that got me in that first tune, in that it's like this quiet intensity that's bubbling. It's really just like, you know, it's something, and that's, you know, I've got this thing about intensity. How do you wield it? How do you control it? And how do you use it in various different forms? And for me, that's one of them, you know, that tune haunted me for a while because I just couldn't understand it. That it could be that intense, but not overt. It could be intense in a introvert way. The other thing, just from Coltrane of that general period, is I feel like he's just not afraid to let the spirit take over. And actually, the technical proficiency is in aid of having the spirit, or a kind of spiritual manifestation. And by spiritual manifestation, I just mean that the intuitive forces that direct your playing, they take over what you know or what you think you understand should happen. I feel like at that stage, from like 66 onwards, well, around 66, that spirit just takes over Coltrane, and he just like lets go, especially on the live recordings. And it's something that I've tried to really have guide my playing, because that's what I want. I want to be in situations where what I know becomes of less importance to what I feel, and what I feel is the spirit, you know.
Beautiful.
Hey, Shabaka, can I say something with that? I joke around with my friends that call that period, like, you know, the end of the classic quartet, when they're starting to switch off to Rashid and Alice, like the Holy Ghost period. Because it's like, I think, forget saxophone, whatever instrument you are, it's kind of like Train's career to me is always like climbing. When you get to that classic quartet with Elvin and everything, the way McCoy and they're kind of laying those ones, it's kind of like they're starting the car, and it's like they really know how to harness energy. I mean, like, besides the playing and the level and the technique and the sheets of sound and the, oh my God, they really are pulling on some higher level energy. And I almost feel like, you know, maybe Mr. Shepp can help me, that he's practicing so much so that when he gets to these moments, it's almost like he's just free. He can go wherever he wants to go and express whatever he wants. And the practicing and the technical part is to get you to the place where when the downbeat happens on that stage, you're free for your Holy Ghost moment. You're like, oh, I don't have nothing's holding me back. It's not, oh, I can't play this scale, so now I'm stuck in this box. Yeah. So I definitely felt that way with those albums you're talking about. For me, Stellar Regions, Olé was a big one for me when you know when they start getting into those drone periods. I'm a big fan of letting the vamp take you to wherever God wants. Hey, you are prepared, my man.
You know, I need to jump in and just point out that, you know, there in jazz now, there's this long tradition of you know, John Coltrane tribute recordings. And so I just realized we have what was pretty much, you know, the most recent one, which is Lakecia's Pursuance, but the very first one that was by name focused on John Coltrane was 4 for Train, which was Mr. Shepp's debut on Impulse Records. And I just thought that, the point that you were making, Greg, about how, inhabiting the music, or it was Lakecia, I think, who mentioned this, the idea of getting inside the music, but not necessarily just redoing Coltrane, but finding, new wine for the old bottle, so to speak, you were there when actually John Coltrane he witnessed the recording of that first tribute album, correct, Mr. Shepp?
Yeah, John. In fact, Bob Thiel, who produced the album, was really rather reluctant to record me. And when I got into the studio, Rudy Van Gelder's studio, Bob had his back turned to me, and I could see smoke puffing from his pipe, almost symbolically telling me that I was not really welcome at all. And the only reason I was there was because Train had suggested my name. He didn't turn around to look at me at all. And when we recorded the first couple of tunes, at the end of the second piece, he said, "Hey, this stuff is great. I'm going to call John and ask him to come out." John was living then on Long Island, and we were in New Jersey. So he called Train rather abruptly, and Train very graciously accepted to come out to the studio to hear the recording.
From all the way from Long Island to New Jersey.
Long Island to New Jersey. It was about 11 o'clock in the evening.
For those not in the New York area, that's not a short hop.
No. And if you notice on the cover, John doesn't have any socks on. I understood that he didn't wear socks generally anyway, but it is an indication of how extemporaneous his decision to come out to New Jersey was. And he listened very patiently to all the takes. And there was one that was not written by John. It was an original of mine. And Bob didn't like it. He said, quite frankly to John, he said, well, I don't like this last piece. And it was called Rufus Swung. His back at last to the wind, then his neck snapped. And so John listened very patiently to the recording, and he said, "I like it, Bob. I think we ought to keep it in." And that's the one reason why I have one song on the recording, which I wrote. But
which is about lynching, right?
It's about a lynching. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so it's the title is very explicit and has a socio-political meaning, which at that time wasn't really quite so common in so-called jazz recordings. But Train was very receptive and had an open mind for innovation. He was the key to innovation. He was the reason why many of us took the chances that we did at that time, because he was constantly evolving and trying out new things. In fact, one of his favorite saxophonists of the period was Albert Ayler, precisely because Albert was completely free in that sense. He had his method of playing was suggestive of his things that he felt. For example, Mike White, the violinist, tells a story of a rehearsal with Albert and his brother John, and so Albert, normally when you think of rehearsals, cats are talking about scales and chords and so on, but Albert's suggested, let's play hunger, loneliness. His concept was completely one of feeling rather than notes, and I think that's what John was striving for, to really get outside the concept of notes and to really express a complete sense of feelings, which Albert had arrived at. Maybe he started there, being the son of evangelists, and Coltrane also had a very spiritual background, coming from a family of preachers, and so I think he felt a certain relationship with Albert that was quite close.
Greg, I think Melissa has to leave pretty soon. Unfortunately, we only have her until 5:15, but or so. Melissa, thank you so much for your time. Before you have to leave, would you like to, put an end to your the period on the end of your sentence, regarding Coltrane?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that it's such an honor to be part of this, Mr. Shepp. It's such an honor to be able to hear you and to hear the history. It's so important for the younger generations to be able to hear what you have to say. And Lakecia and Shabaka and Greg, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's just been a pleasure. And one thing that I have to say is that as my generation, we're so lucky to be able to have access to all of these recordings. It's really like a master class. It's a legacy of so much information, and it's so important. So thank you, Ashley, for initiating all of this.
Thank you, Melissa. Stay well. Stay
healthy. So much for being a part. Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Yeah. So Shabaka, you pulled Sun Chip out, and Lakecia alluded to these higher energies that these artists, Alice and Rashid and so forth, were pulling from. As they went into what she called the Holy Ghost period. And I want to kind of give you a moment to kind of wax philosophical about this relationship, this bridge that Coltrane established between astrophysics and Afrofuturism, because you talked about that release of energy in the countdown. And I mean, this was a moment, of course, because of the space race because of Sun Ra, musicians were really looking to the stars and to cosmology, this idea of escape velocity and so forth, stellar regions. And Coltrane, I know when he was in Japan in '66, they asked him how would he like to be remembered, and he said as a saint. And so we know there's a Coltrane church that emerged out of that relationship to his music. But how do you how would you articulate, this connection that he made, through the album titles and then through the practice itself between, between theoretical physics and science fiction,
Well, the one thing is that
or
theory
and
is
spirituality.
Theory, is always a theory of a practice. It's like it says in the title, a theory is a theory of a practical phenomenon. So for me, at that point where Coltrane starts expressing all of this energy from that kind of late point in his career, it's like he's gotten past the theory of what music is. So, past the theorizing of music, and it's onto the thing itself, what music can actually do for people. And, like I think Lakecia was talking about the circle, the circular that Rashid Ali was talking about. And for me, that's the important thing. And this is an African ontological concept, the idea of the circle as opposed to the line, that it's not just about what the performer themselves is giving out to the audience in a linear fashion. It's about how that energy relates back to them, and that obviously goes back to the whole call and response tradition in this African tradition. And for me, when you're talking about stellar regions and the kind of free, expansive nature of the playing, it's John Coltrane, in the way that I'm interpreting it. And forgive me if I'm wrong. It's John Coltrane appreciating that there is limitless energy. That he himself is not the source of the energy. He's a conduit for something that's greater than him. And if he can surrender himself to this force of energy, that he can actually uplift the consciousness of the people around him that come into contact with him. That's how I see it. And that's what from what I've read about his spiritual practices and thoughts, that's what I think that he's trying to allude to, the fact that there is a greater force of energy that can be summoned and that can be harnessed for the forces of good.
Fantastic. Thank you.
For me, when I think of, the Coltrane, John Coltrane especially, it was kind of like the first artist, of course, the span and the way that Black music has evolved and where it's come from, and from the fields straight to the streets, how it's moved. There's a legacy of finding energy through pain and finding the healing through that pain. So that was already there, but somehow when I first heard John Coltrane's music, even before I knew the stories that he was, mystical and I didn't put it together when I saw Mars, Leo. I was just like, oh, okay, planets. But it was kind of the first artist to let me know that it was okay to play music for the true intention of healing and for the true intention of touching and embracing people. It's kind of like a lot of music these days comes from a collegiate place, which helps us because we need these schools and universities to get to a, it's not the same where you can't go down to like club after club after club to meet these legends. But I think sometimes when we're educating and learning, we're forgetting to bring people back to the reason why you're an artist, why you are essential, why you are here and trying to be on this journey. Like the music itself, it has a lesson in it, but it is also a journey to take you to that next place. And, we all know that feeling when you're on the stage interacting with your audience and they're screaming out, you're screaming out with the band. It's almost like a church service right there. It's this constant, the reason COVID is so devastating is there's a bond that the audience and the band members have that is so divine and precious. You're not just playing for yourself. You're playing the moods that they're feeling. You're playing the emotional state they're having. If I get sad right now, the first thing I think is, what song do I want to listen to? If I'm happy, I'm like, oh, what song am I going to dance to? It's just kind of the way we're trained to have a soundtrack to our lives. So when you think of Coltrane, you think of somebody that was allowing himself to just be completely open and free and blank and allowing the universe to move him and use him almost like a tool, like the ultimate weapon of peace to spread this. And I think that's why people sometimes worship him so much, is because he, as a man, he exceeded the things you think that a human being can do on the horn. And then as a spiritual presence, he was almost like from another world coming to visit on that Sun Ra vibe. You think of Sun Ra, you think of somebody that just came to be with us for a time and teach us and move forward. So that's one of the most influential things to me. I just hope that, that I can learn that my life has a purpose and a blessing. And whatever I can do, for as long as I can do it, to be a blessing to humanity is kind of the purpose. And I think that's the legacy of music. Like, jazz is born out of such an oppressive, situation. And for it to evolve for R&B, gospel, rhythm and blues, all these different types of music, pop music has come out of it. And the joy it brings people, I think it really is a testament to the true purpose. Once you get past the giant steps and you get that down and you shed and you've tried all you can try, when you get to that stage and it's almost like you're here for the audience. I'm bearing my soul. And here we go. And we're going to go on this journey together. That 90 minutes you're experiencing, that 75 minutes, that's why the audience pays to come to the show. Is because we all going to church and it's just, you can't get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Lakecia, I just have to interject that what you were saying. I wish I could take what you just said and play it for my students, because one of the things I keep reminding them is that music is a community act, and especially with jazz, we're talking about community music. And you just have to look at the titles on Giant Steps to see that, John Coltrane is actually naming the people in his circle, in his community. Mr. PC is Paul Chambers. Saida is his stepdaughter. Naima was his wife at the time. Cousin Mary was his cousin, So that, this idea of participation and connection that you're talking about, especially in this lockdown period, is something that we really have to hang on to, I think, and that John Coltrane is the exemplar of that effect and that idea in the music. And the way that he has reached so many people, I think, is indicative. And I've been watching the chat board, and we have people from all parts of the world, from South America, from Morocco, different places in Europe, across the states, who are all making comments and asking questions, etc. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Brother Shepp, I know that you have done recordings of traditional African American spirituals, religious music, and I wonder, how do you see the connection between what Coltrane achieved with the Love Supreme and then his sources in those, that traditional Black religious experience, those institutions,
Well,
the church by any other name.
yeah, not only that, but John is one of the innovators of world music. His recordings with Olatunji, Ravi Shankar, were, for the period at that time, were quite new and impressive for that reason, because at that point, so-called jazz musicians were not making those connections between the music which had come out of the Negro spiritual, gospel, and blues, and other types of music that came from other areas of the world. Nowadays you have like klezmer, Jewish klezmer music. Many musicians were inspired by John and Eric to make connections between their music and African American music. So I was, when I went to Africa in the 1960s, I was very inspired by John's collaboration with Tunji and Ravi Shankar. And later, when I conspired with Horace Farland to create an album of spirituals, to recreate that experience in my upbringing.
Mm.
I had my grandmother was very close to the church, and so the spirituals we recorded, I was very familiar with the time that I was a child, and I connected with them in a deeply emotional way. So I think they transported a certain feeling that would otherwise not have been there if I hadn't had that experience with my grandmother and my aunt, and later hearing John confirm those connections,
Mm-hmm.
even expand them by playing spiritual, putting spiritually informed music in other contexts, in a contemporary context. So Train was very inspiring to me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're coming close to the end here, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we? I was looking for questions actually from the chat room that, we should have, or I should have, stepped up and made it clear that, we'd be happy to, entertain a few questions from the people who are tuning in. But I didn't make that clear, so, my error there. But if we do have time to squeeze that in, what we had was 90 minutes set up for this, so we're coming towards the end. A lot of the questions that I've seen are kind of technical questions about Giant Sepp's stereo versus mono. I'm saying the background story of the mono versus stereo mixes. Yeah.
Well, I guess one more area that we haven't touched on, and it has to do with the political implications of Coltrane's music, Coltrane's career, his presence. He was considered the voice of the revolution, certainly in the 60s and early 70s. And I'm wondering, from you all, does your conception of Coltrane also have that that notion of this music being a radical confrontation with authority attached to it as well?
Well, John never expressed his own political position, but I always associated his music with the statements of Malcolm X. I found a very close relationship between his musical pronouncements and the discourse of Malcolm. A certain power and even the suggestion of protest in his music, because his music was, of course, not, though he admired Charlie Parker quite a bit, it was quite a departure from the musical pronouncements of Bird. And I can remember, for example, one night at the Half Note on Spring Street. Um, whenever he played there, the place would be packed. And this night was a Sunday night. They closed at 3 o'clock, but nobody wanted to leave. And so the owners decided that they would not serve any more drinks, and they would lock the door. And John played an extra set that night, and it was really deeply spiritual and indicative of how his music transported ideas. It was a music of a sound, you might say, a protest, of certainly a discourse with the audience that that indicated something outside, beyond music. There was a guy there who followed John constantly, Vic George, and when the music would get really hot, he would say, "Get him, John." And so Train's expression touched a chord in his audience that went beyond just musical expression. It touched an element. People, especially the black people in his audience, responded almost the way I've seen people respond to the message of Malcolm. I heard Malcolm preach at Temple Number 7, and I saw him on the streets of Harlem. And he evoked a similar response in his narrative, his discourse to John, in his musical expression. So in that sense, I related the musical pronouncements of John Coltrane at times with the actual preaching of Malcolm X, and the effect he had on his audience was very similar in terms of bringing out emotions. Really, that were expressive of protest. Beyond protest, turning musical ideas into actual literary expressions.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right.
I mean, if I can just add a little thing there in terms of the connection between John Coltrane's music and political expression. One of the things that I guess politics is trying to achieve is to galvanize the will to change the situation of people. You know, because politics is nothing if people don't have the will to change. It's just electing leaders, if not, you know. And one of the things that intersects between music and politics is it does the same thing. It can galvanize your will. You know, it can strengthen your will and your spirit. You know, people can be oppressed, but it's when that will to change their situation, that spirit that allows them to channel their energy is strong enough. That's when things start moving and shaking. And for me, John Coltrane's music is music that reinforces the spirit. You know, it might not be a direct line. You might not be able to say this one person heard it and then did a political action. But if that music that is spirit enhancing is in the air, is in the atmosphere around the time of political change, it has to have an effect on the spirits of the people who are doing the groundwork, you know.
I want to add something to that as well.
Sure.
I think sometimes people, it's easy to put the gaze on the art and say, oh, the art is super politicalized. It's super, you know, it's they're revolting. The revolution is here. But in Black music, it's that art is a communal thing. It's a cultural thing. You're playing the culture. You're playing the sounds of what is happening, and art reflects the society. So if my songs and my music, every time I play, you're like, oh my God, Lakecia, so radicalized. It's because I'm playing, you should change the gaze to the society. And we are playing what we are witnessing and what we are experiencing. And that's why the soundtrack is playing. So I think it's easy. It's our job actually to be reflective of the times that we are in and to communicate that to our audiences, because we're all experiencing. I'm experiencing, no matter how much. You don't have to come on TV and say, this is how I feel, this is how I feel. My music is going to reflect my feelings, and it's my desire and goal to give the people a voice. A lot of people don't have a voice. They work in the office. They may be oppressed. I'm not writing a song called Give Me Healthcare. You know, but you may feel the desire and the hunger within me and the pain within, you know, not being able to get the treatment that you need. So I don't necessarily think it's our job to go off ranting and raving all the time, but it is our job to express what's happening. And sometimes, as Shabaka saying, that should evoke change, because every revolution has a soundtrack. Every revolution has people, you know, when I open my window, especially in New York, and they're screaming, no justice, no peace. They're in time. No justice, no peace. No, they're never just off rhythm, you know, screaming random things. So I think that as artists, I think I heard Nina Simone say this once. You're not doing your job if you're not being a part of the here and now of what you're in and playing, you know, whether it's your job to soothe people, spiritually guide them, or to be that vessel, or it's your job to get out there and do the groundwork in the streets and be the sound, you know? I just think that as artists, you have choices and picks to do, but, you know, I would hope that if you make an album or something, that they could play your album to the news of what was going on in that time period, and it would actually have some kind of correlation.
Well, we can't all talk together, but we can sing together.
Yeah.
Guys, I just want to say that it's been incredibly enlightening. The power of listening and learning from listening is really what's of this moment. And hearing you guys talk and share your insights, and then playing Coltrane's music, I can't think of a better way of celebrating what would have been his 94th birthday, of marking the 60th anniversary of the release of this iconic album, and that now it's available in a certain format and at a certain kind of technology, you know, that invites a whole new generation in, you know, to listen to Coltrane's music and to develop themselves along the way in the manner that you guys have obviously benefited from. So, I just want to say thank you, Lakecia. Thank you, Shabaka. Mr. Shepp, what an honor. Greg, it's always great working with you, whether it's in a classroom or an event like this. You know, this has been extremely special, and thank you to everyone who's been watching and involved and sending their comments and all. I hope this isn't the last, but to be continued.
Oh, thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again, Greg.
All right, same here, Archie.